When it comes to carpal tunnel syndrome, most people are going to assume the issues are in the wrist, which is why you're going to see so many exercises for the forearm extensors and stretches for the forearm flexors. But what if your carpal tunnel syndrome wasn't really coming from the wrist and it was actually coming from somewhere else? Well, today, not only will you learn where your pain is coming from, you're also going to learn what's creating it and how to get rid of it. Adam here from TrainMassage.com. And if you didn't know, one of the biggest reasons for carpal tunnel syndrome is going to be overuse in different muscles, with one of the most common muscles being the forearm flexors, which I'm sure a lot of you already know. But if the forearm flexors are the ones that are constantly getting tight, then maybe you should also ask yourself what other muscles can also be tight and creating pain. There's actually two main muscles that can also create carpal tunnel syndrome-like pain if they become overused and tight. And those two muscles are your scalenes and your brachialis. How do these two muscles create pain all the way down into the wrist? The answer has to do with trigger points. You see, when a muscle becomes overused, it will begin to shorten and contract, resulting in the formation of trigger points. Now, the problem with trigger points is that not only can it constrict on your nerves and blood vessels, but they can also create what's called referral pain that feels like carpal tunnel syndrome, even though the pain is nowhere near there. This means trigger points in the neck can create pain all the way down into the wrist, which is where you're going to find the scalene muscles. The scalene muscles are your muscles on the side of the neck, and it's where your nerves and blood vessels come out from your spine and into your shoulders and arms. This means if these muscles become overused thanks to things like bad posture, chest breathing, or even just stress, then they can not only create things like carpal tunnel syndrome by pinching on those nerves and blood vessels, but can also create other issues like thoracic outlet syndrome. So let's do a quick check to see if your scalenes are creating your pain. Start out by applying some gentle pressure to the side of your neck, looking to see if it feels tender or even if it recreates your carpal tunnel syndrome pain. If any of these are happening, then that's a good sign that these muscles are tight and most likely creating your issues. So here's what you can do. Start by looking for the most tender spot within the muscle or the spot that creates your pain. Now from here, perform micro movements by moving back and forth and side to side with light to medium pressure for 1 minute. It is okay if it is uncomfortable as long as you're able to breathe through it. Now perform a pin and stretch by tilting your head to the same side, pinning down that tender spot, and then tilting your head to the opposite side of the body to stretch that muscle out. Reset and then repeat for another minute to help release the trigger points in the scalene muscles. Now there's another muscle that's between the neck and the wrist that's usually overlooked when it comes to carpal tunnel syndrome pain, and that muscle is going to be the brachialis. This muscle is considered the workhorse for your elbow flexors, which means it is prone to become shorn and tight, creating tightness on any nerves and blood vessels that's around it. And when it comes to carpal tunnel syndrome specifically, there's two trigger points on the bottom portion of the brachialis that can actually create compression on your median nerve. So let's get rid of these trigger points. Now for this muscle, begin looking for the most tender spot within the lower portion of the biceps by grabbing it like a claw as you massage it back and forth for 1 minute. Once again, it should be uncomfortable, but it shouldn't be painful, and you should be able to breathe throughout the entire technique. Now perform a pin and stretch by starting with the arm flexed, pinning down the most tender spots, and then extend your arm to stretch the muscle out. Release your bicep, reset, and then repeat for another 1 to 2 minutes. Now, of course, your carpal tunnel syndrome might actually be caused by just straight up fascia in the forearm being tight, creating restrictions on your median nerve, and that creates your pain. So if that is the case, then let's actually massage the forearm out as well. Start off by massaging your forearms with light to medium pressure, starting at the wrist and then moving up the arm and back down. You can either use your hands for this or a tool like a massage ball. Regardless of whichever one you want to do it for about 30 seconds. This is not only going to help you increase the blood flow in your arms, but it's also going to help you find the most tender spots for the next techniques. Now, once you find the most tender spot, go and apply static pressure for 1 minute. Trust me, this technique is extremely boring, but the whole idea here is we're just applying as much pressure as we can to the point it's uncomfortable, but you can still breathe through it. And if you just hold this pressure for 1 minute, focusing on that pain, you will notice how that pain either begins to dissipate or shift or just go away completely. Now from here, we're going to be stripping out that wrist in order to help loosen up that fascia even more. To do this, start with your arm flexed inward as you pin down the tissues within the wrist. Now slowly slide your fingers up the forearm as you stretch the wrist out in the opposite direction. Reset and then repeat this for another 1 to 2 minutes to stretch out that fascia around that median nerve. So now that you've loosened up the fascia and even got rid of those trigger points, points, now is the time to go through those different stretches for your forearm flexors and those exercises for your forearm extensors, because now that the fascia is loosened up, those stretches and those exercises are going to be way more effective. Now, chances are, if you have carpal tunnel syndrome, you're also going to have something like thoracic outlet syndrome. And if that is the case, then make sure to click on the video in this top corner.